Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in life when you realize something profound, a moment of clarity, of stark revelation. You see, we spend so much of our time trying to belong, trying to fit into places, into groups, into the expectations of others. We mold ourselves, we bend, we shrink, we adjust, all in an effort to be accepted, to be liked, to be valued. And yet, how many of us pause and ask the fundamental question, do they value me? Do they respect me? Do they see me, truly see me for who I am? I've walked many roads in my lifetime. I've met all kinds of people, the kind-hearted, the dreamers, the selfless, but also the manipulators, the deceivers, the ones who take and never give, the ones who smile with their mouths but never with their hearts. And if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I can tell you with absolute certainty, it is this. It is far better to walk alone than to walk with those who do not value you. There's a peculiar thing about loneliness. People fear it. They dread the very idea of being alone, of not having company, of not being surrounded by familiar faces. But let me ask you, what is loneliness really? Is it the absence of people? Or is it the presence of people who make you feel invisible? You can be in a crowded room and still feel utterly alone. You can be in a relationship, in a friendship, in a family, and yet feel like a stranger. Because the truth is, it's not about being around people, it's about being around the right people. I've always admired the silence, the stillness of solitude. People assume that to be alone is to be broken, to be abandoned. But I see it differently. There is immense strength in solitude. It is in solitude that you meet yourself. It is in solitude that you listen to your own voice without the noise of the world drowning it out. You see, when you walk alone, there is no one to manipulate you, no one to diminish your worth, no one to make you question your value. There is only you in your rawest, purest form, and that is a powerful place to be. But the problem is we don't trust ourselves enough. We think we need others to validate our worth. We chase approval like beggars chasing crumbs. We tell ourselves that any company is better than none at all. We tolerate disrespect. We excuse mistreatment. We ignore the signs. Because we are too afraid to walk away. But tell me, what kind of life is that? What kind of existence is one where you have to constantly prove that you are worthy of basic human decency? Pourquoi puis? A life where you have to fight to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. That is not life. That is survival. And you were not put on this earth to merely survive. You were born to live, to breathe, to thrive, to be surrounded by those who cherish you, who uplift you, who see the greatness in you, even when you forget it yourself. And if you cannot find those people, if you are surrounded by those who only take, who only diminish you, who make you feel small, then it is not only your right, but your duty to leave, to walk away. And if that means walking alone, then so be it. I have often been asked about success, about what it means to achieve something meaningful in life. And I always say success is not about how many people surround you. It is not about the applause, the admiration, the external validation. Success is about peace. True success is standing in your own presence and feeling at home, feeling enough. And you cannot feel that peace, you cannot feel that success if you are constantly surrounded by people who make you question your own worth. We live in a world where we are taught that we need to be liked, that we need to be accepted. From the time we are children, we are conditioned to seek approval. But let me tell you something that they won't teach you in schools, something you won't find in textbooks. There is something far greater than being liked. It is being respected. And respect does not come from chasing after people who refuse to see your value. Respect comes from knowing your worth and refusing to settle for anything less. I have played many roles in my life, on screen, off screen, and I have learned that life too is a stage. People will come and go. Some will applaud you, some will criticize you. Some will lift you up and some will try to tear you down. But at the end of the day, the most important role you will ever play is yourself. And you must play that role with dignity, with strength, with self-respect. You do not need permission to walk away. You do not need approval to choose yourself. You do not need validation to know that you deserve better. And yes, there will be moments of doubt. There will be moments when you wonder if you made the right choice. Moments when the silence of solitude feels unbearable. But in those moments, remind yourself, better to stand alone with your dignity intact than to be surrounded by people who make you question your worth. There is a saying that has stayed with me over the years. A lion does not concern itself with the opinions of sheep. And I say to you, do not concern yourself with those who cannot see your value. Do not waste your energy trying to prove your worth to those who refuse to acknowledge it. Do not lower yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Be the lion. Stand tall, stand alone if you must, but never ever shrink for the comfort of others. You will lose people, that is inevitable, but not all losses are losses. Some are blessings in disguise, some are the universe clearing the way for something greater, something better, something that aligns with the person you are meant to become. And so I say this to you with absolute certainty. Walk alone if you must. Choose yourself. Honor yourself. Because in the end, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. And that relationship should never be compromised for the sake of those who do not see your worth. It is better, far better, to stand alone than to walk with those who do not value you. This speech captures the essence of Anthony Hopkins' wisdom and gravitas, focusing on self-worth, solitude, and the strength in walking alone. Would you like any refinements? There is a deep irony in life how often we betray ourselves for the sake of others. How often we silence our voices, suppress our truths, and diminish our worth just to maintain relationships that do nothing but drain us. And why? Because we are told that belonging is everything, that companionship, no matter how hollow, is better than solitude, that being surrounded, even by those who do not respect us, is better than standing alone. But I ask you, what cost? At what cost do we compromise ourselves for the illusion of acceptance? I have lived long enough to know this. There is nothing lonelier than being in the wrong company. You see, when you are alone, you are at least honest with yourself. There is no pretense, no performance. But when you are surrounded by those who do not value you, you begin to lose yourself in their expectations, in their neglect, in their indifference. You begin to play a role that was never meant for you, and little by little, piece by piece, you fade. There is a kind of erosion that happens when you stay too long in places that do not nourish you. You stop dreaming as boldly as you once did. You stop believing in your own voice. You begin to measure your worth through the eyes of those who barely see you. And before you realize it, you have become a shadow of yourself, living a life that does not belong to you, walking a path that was carved out by the opinions of others. That is the slow death of the soul. And I tell you now, no relationship, no friendship, no association is worth that price. People often ask, how do you know when it's time to walk away? How do you know when someone truly does not value you? And the answer is simple: pay attention. Pay attention to how they treat you when you have nothing to offer them. Pay attention to whether your presence is appreciated or merely tolerated. Pay attention to whether they celebrate your victories or secretly resent them. Pay attention to whether they uplift you or make you feel like a burden. Pay attention to whether they uplift you or make you feel like a burden. People reveal themselves not through their words, but through their actions. And when they show you that you are not valued, believe them. But belief alone is not enough. You must act on it. That is the hardest part, isn't it? Walking away. Letting go. We cling to people out of habit, out of history, out of the fear of starting over. We tell ourselves that maybe things will change, maybe they don't mean to hurt us, maybe we are expecting too much, and in doing so we settle for less than we deserve. But I ask you this: why do we hold on to people who would not hold on to us? Why do we fight to stay in the lives of those who would not fight for us? There is something deeply tragic about that. The truth is, there is power in absence. There is strength in walking away, not as an act of bitterness, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of self-respect. Because if they cannot see your value while you are present, let them feel your absence. Let them feel the weight of what they took for granted. And if they do not feel it, then they never deserved you in the first place. I have seen it happen time and time again. People who only realize what they had once it is gone. But by then, it is too late. And here's what I say to you. Do not wait for them to realize your worth. Do not waste your days hoping for a moment of recognition, for an apology that may never come, for a change that may never arrive. Know your worth now. Act on it now. Leave now. Because the longer you stay where you are not valued, the more you risk forgetting that you ever deserved more. And I know what you may be thinking. What if walking away means being alone? What if there is no one else? What if solitude is unbearable? And to that, I say this: there is no loneliness more painful than being unseen. There is no solitude more haunting than feeling invisible in the presence of others. And if the choice is between standing alone in truth or standing among those who diminish me, I will choose solitude every time. Today I take sticks, parkestapist, because at least in solitude I am whole. There is a misconception that loneliness is the enemy, that to be alone is to be incomplete, but that is not true. You see, solitude is not emptiness. It is not a void to be filled with meaningless company. It is a space, a sacred space, where you meet yourself, where you learn who you are when no one else is watching, where you grow, where you heal, where you reclaim every part of yourself that you once gave away so freely. And when you embrace that, when you truly learn to be alone, something remarkable happens. You become untouchable. You no longer settle. You no longer tolerate half-hearted love, one-sided friendships, or conditional acceptance. You no longer seek validation from people who cannot even validate themselves. You become whole within yourself. And when you are whole, you attract those who recognize your worth without you having to prove it. You attract those who value you, not for what you can give them, not for how you make them feel, but simply for who you are. But to get there, you must first be willing to walk away from what does not serve you. You must be willing to endure the discomfort of transition, the unease of solitude, the weight of uncertainty, because on the other side of that is freedom. On the other side of that is a life where you no longer beg to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen. A life where you no longer settle for scraps of attention, for moments of kindness that are followed by waves of neglect. A life where you are valued, not because you fought for it, not because you proved yourself worthy, but because you simply are. And that, my friends, is the greatest gift you can give yourself. To know your worth so deeply that you would rather walk alone than compromise it. To understand that true belonging does not come from forcing yourself into spaces where you do not fit. It comes from being in the presence of those who make you feel at home. And until you find those people, walk alone. Stand tall. Trust that you are enough. Because in the end, it is better, far better, to stand alone than to walk with those who do not value you. There is something deeply liberating about realizing you do not need anyone's permission to be yourself. It is a truth that is difficult to embrace, especially in a world that constantly tells you that your worth is measured by how many people stand beside you, how many approve of you, how many accept you. But I tell you now, the greatest mistake you can make is believing that your value is dependent on the opinions of others. And so, the moment you tie your worth to someone else's perception of you, you become their prisoner. You will spend your days seeking validation in places where it will never be given freely, trying to earn love from those incapable of offering it, trying to prove yourself to those who have already made up their minds about you. And that, my friends, is not a life. That is a slow and painful erasure of everything you are meant to be. I have seen people contort themselves into shapes they were never meant to take just to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. I have seen people silence their voices to keep the peace, lower their standards to maintain relationships, suppress their dreams because they were told they were asking for too much. And what happens in the end? They lose themselves. They wake up one day and realize they do not recognize the person in the mirror. They realize they have spent years, sometimes decades, molding themselves into a version of themselves that is palatable to others, and yet, despite all of that, they are still unappreciated, still undervalued, still unseen. I ask you, what is the point of belonging if it comes at the cost of your own soul? What is the point of being surrounded by people who only love you when you fit into their expectations? What is the point of maintaining relationships where you have to fight to be heard, to be respected, to be treated with dignity? There is no glory in belonging to a place that does not cherish you. There is no honor in keeping company with those who diminish you. And so I tell you now, if you ever find yourself in a space where you feel like you have to constantly prove your worth, where your love is not reciprocated, where your presence is not truly valued, leave. Walk away. Stand alone if you must, because the alternative is far worse. People will say it is selfish to choose yourself. They will call you arrogant, ungrateful, too sensitive, too demanding. They will say you have changed, that you are too proud, that you are expecting too much. But listen closely. Those who truly love you will never ask you to shrink. Those who truly value you will never require you to betray yourself in order to keep their company. And those who truly respect you will never make you feel like you are too much for simply existing as you are. There is something powerful about knowing your own worth. It changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. It changes the way you allow others to treat you, and most importantly, it changes what you are willing to tolerate, because when you truly understand your value, you no longer settle for relationships that are built on convenience rather than care. You no longer accept friendships that are one-sided, where you are always the giver and never the receiver. You no longer remain in places where you have to beg for love, for attention, for kindness. You realize that it is not your job to convince people to value you. It is their job to recognize your worth on their own. And if they cannot see it, if they refuse to honor it, that is not your burden to carry. Walking away is not always easy, I know that. It is difficult to turn your back on something familiar, even when that familiarity is toxic. It is hard to choose solitude over company, even when that company drains you. It is painful to leave behind relationships you once cherished, even when they no longer serve you. But I promise you this: the pain of walking away is nothing compared to the pain of staying where you do not belong. The discomfort of solitude is nothing compared to the suffering of being unseen. And here's the thing: when you finally walk away, when you finally choose yourself, something extraordinary happens. You make space. You make space for people who do see you, who do appreciate you, who do value you without conditions. You open the door for relationships that do not require you to abandon yourself in order to be accepted. But that space cannot be filled if you are still clinging to what is not meant for you. You must be willing to let go. I have known people who have spent their entire lives holding on to friendships that expired long ago, to relationships that drained them, to family members who never truly supported them, to environments that made them feel like outsiders. And when you ask them why, they say, "Because I don't want to be alone," as if loneliness is the worst fate imaginable. But I tell you now, the real tragedy is not being alone, It is living a life where you are surrounded by people who make you feel like you are. I have spent years observing human nature, watching how people interact, how they love, how they abandon, how they betray, how they redeem themselves. And if there's one thing I have learned, it is this: people who do not value you will never suddenly wake up and change. They will never suddenly see your worth after years of ignoring it. They will never suddenly respect you after treating you as an afterthought. Demit faro yavnani fidelo kuno pulutu suamo. Pasa kaskisuru suloikilon. Yasturkobasi. If someone does not value you now, they will not value you later, and the longer you stay in that dynamics, the harder it becomes to leave. So I say to you, do not wait. Do not waste another moment hoping for someone to see you when they have already decided not to. Do not wait for an apology that may never come, for a realization that may never arrive, for a change that may never happen. Choose yourself now. Stand up for yourself now. And if that means standing alone, so be it. There is nothing weak about solitude. There is nothing shameful about choosing your own dignity over companionship. In fact, it is one of the greatest acts of self-respect you will ever commit. And let me tell you something else. When you finally make that decision, when you finally stop tolerating less than you deserve, you will find that the loneliness you feared so much was never real. Because true loneliness is not the absence of people, it is the absence of connection, of understanding, of genuine care. And when you walk away from those who do not value you, you create the possibility for real connection to enter your life. When you walk away from those who do not value you, you create the possibility for real connection to enter your life. You create space for people who see you, who hear you, who appreciate you without conditions. But you must first be willing to stand alone before those people can find you. There is a great power in learning to be comfortable with yourself, in knowing that you do not need anyone's approval to be worthy, in understanding that your value is not determined by how many people choose to stay in your life. Some people will leave, and that is fine. Some people will misunderstand you, and that is fine. Some people will resent you for choosing yourself, and that is fine too. Because at the end of the day, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. And if that relationship is strong, if that relationship is rooted in self-respect, then you will never again allow yourself to walk with those who do not value you. It is better, far better, to stand alone than to walk with those who do not see your worth. And the moment you understand that, truly understand that, you will never again settle for anything less than you deserve. There is a moment in life when you must decide what you will and will not accept. A moment when you must draw a line between who you are and who the world expects you to be. That moment is not easy, it is not convenient, it is not without its discomforts, but it is necessary, because the alternative, the slow erosion of your self-worth, the silent surrender of your dignity, is far worse. Too many people live their entire lives accommodating others at the expense of their own well-being. Too many people silence their own needs just to maintain relationships that are unbalanced, unfair, and unfulfilling. But I tell you this, the cost of being untrue to yourself is far greater than the cost of walking away. I have seen it too often. People staying in friendships where they are always the ones giving. People remaining in relationships where they are treated as an afterthought. People staying in jobs, families, social circles where they are tolerated, not celebrated. And they justify it to themselves. They say, well, at least I am not alone. They convince themselves that being mistreated is better than being ignored. That being undervalued is better than not being valued at all. But that is not the truth. That is fear speaking. That is the fear of stepping into the unknown. Because deep down, we all fear being alone. We fear what silence might reveal about us. We fear what solitude might force us to confront. But let me tell you something that I have learned over the years. Being alone is not the enemy. Being alone is where you find yourself. Being alone is where you strip away the noise, the expectations, the illusions, and come face to face with who you really are. And that is the most important relationship you will ever have. Because if you cannot stand alone, if you do not know how to be at peace with yourself, then you will always seek validation from the wrong places. You will always look for others to define your worth. And that is dangerous because there will always be people who are more than willing to take advantage of that. There are those who will use your kindness as an excuse to take advantage of you. There are those who will mistake your patience for permission to mistreat you. There are those who will drain you of your energy, your love, your generosity, and offer nothing in return. And the only way to stop that cycle is to recognize it for what it is and walk away. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet, unwavering confidence of someone who knows they deserve better. People will try to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. They will say you have changed. They will say you are being difficult, selfish, unreasonable. But let me ask you this. Why is it that the moment you start valuing yourself, you become the villain in someone else's story? Why is it that people only seem to call you selfish when you stop doing what they want? Pay attention to that. Pay attention to the way people react when you set boundaries. Pay attention to how they behave when you finally refuse to be treated as an option, because that will tell you everything you need to know about them. True love, whether it be in friendship, in family, in romance, does not require you to prove your worth. It does not require you to beg for attention, for respect, for consideration. True love recognizes your value without you having to demand it. And if you have to fight to be seen, if you have to constantly remind someone to appreciate you, then that is not love. That is obligation. That is convenience disguised as care. And that is not what you deserve. You deserve the kind of love that does not waver, the kind of friendships that do not crumble under the slightest inconvenience, the kind of relationships that do not require you to diminish yourself in order to maintain them. But you will not find those things if you are too afraid to let go of what is comfortable but unfulfilling. Growth is painful. Walking away is painful. There will be days when you wonder if you made the right choice. Nights when the silence feels heavier than you expected. Mornings when you reach for your phone to text someone, only to remember that they were never truly there for you in the first place. And in those moments, you will be tempted to go back, to settle, to accept the love you have, rather than wait for the love you deserve. Do not fall into that trap. Loneliness is not a reason to return to what broke you. Emptiness is not a reason to invite back those who left you hollow in the first place. The space you feel after walking away is not a sign that you made the wrong choice. It is proof that you have made room for something better. And let me tell you, something better will come. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in time. Because when you choose yourself, when you refuse to settle, when you make it clear to the universe that you will no longer accept less than you deserve, you attract the people who are meant for you, the people who see you, the people who respect you, the people who do not need to be reminded of your worth, because they recognize it from the moment they meet you. And until those people arrive, stand tall. Stand alone if you must, because there is strength in solitude. There is clarity in silence. There is freedom in knowing that you do not need anyone's permission to be exactly who you are. I have spent my life watching people chase approval that will never come. I have seen people waste years trying to prove themselves to those who will never appreciate them. And it is a tragedy, a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of a life that should be spent in joy, in love, in peace. You were not put on this earth to be tolerated. You were not born to be an afterthought in your own life. You were not meant to shrink so that others can feel comfortable. You are meant to stand in your full power, to take up space, to demand respect, not with anger, not with desperation, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth. And so I leave you with this. Do not be afraid to stand alone. Do not be afraid to walk away. Do not be afraid to let go of anyone who cannot see your value. It is not your job to convince people to love you. It is not your responsibility to make them recognize your worth. Those who are meant for you will see it without you having to prove anything, and those who cannot see it were never meant to be in your life for the long run. Do you have any do you think they're meant to be in your life for the long run? Uh, Better to stand alone than to walk with those who do not value you. Better to walk a lonely road for a little while than to spend your entire life surrounded by those who make you feel small. Better to be your own source of strength than to depend on people who will never truly be there for you. And if you ever doubt that, if you ever find yourself questioning whether you made the right choice, just remember this. Great things are never built on weak foundations. And the moment you choose yourself, the moment you decide that you will no longer accept less than what you deserve, you lay the foundation for a life that is truly your own. So stand alone if you must, because in standing alone, you are never truly alone. You are standing with yourself, and that is the most powerful thing you can ever do. In the end, life is too short to spend it proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. It is too precious to waste in places where you are merely tolerated rather than celebrated. There is a profound strength in walking away from what no longer serves you, in standing firm in your own self-worth, in embracing solitude rather than settling for companionship that diminishes you. You do not need to justify your value. You do not need to beg for love, respect, or kindness. Those who are meant for you will see your worth effortlessly, and those who do not were never meant to walk beside you in the first place. So, do not be afraid to stand alone. Do not fear the quiet that follows when you remove yourself from spaces where you were not valued, for in that solitude you will find clarity. In that stillness, you will find your true strength. And in that unwavering choice to honor yourself, you will attract the kind of people and experiences that truly belong in your life. Better to walk alone in truth than to walk with those who do not value you. Because in choosing yourself, you choose freedom.